things aren't always going to work out. In fact, the chances are they aren't going to work out. But if you can learn to enjoy shooting your shot, if you can enjoy being the person that showed up, also, you don't know where that leads. The other thing too is like, I mean, I got into acting and, I wouldn't say that my acting career blossomed the way that I wanted to as a young man, but honestly, like, I'm so glad I did acting, because acting has taught me so much about storytelling. It's taught me so much about helping other people. It's taught me so much about life. It's taught me so much about being in the moment. It's been a Zen practice for me in so many ways. And the thing is like, if all we ever base our success upon is, did you make money? Are you successful? Did people recognize you? It's a shitty way to do your life. Are you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Does this give you passion? Do you get lit up? Why don't we ask ourselves questions like that? This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
All right, people, shoot your shot. That's what this one is. That's what we're calling it. Well, Evan and I were talking about some stuff before this, and we ultimately decided this would be the title, but let's just kind of look at what we're saying here. I think one of the ideas of this topic, shoot your shot, is like, when you get a chance, take it, That's an element of this conversation I think we're going to get into. Another element of this conversation that I want to get into as well is why you don't shoot your shot, and also why you don't think you can. Like, why you think maybe you're not the person to take the shot when the opportunity comes, or that you'll never get the opportunity. Some things that I've been confronting for myself recently is opportunities come up and surprise me sometimes, and I realize, hey, you know what? This thing that I want is actually way more accessible than I realized, and way more possible than I realized. And so I'm interested in, why do I ever talk myself out of that? Why do I not think that I add up? Why do, and I think other people can relate to this, but why do we think we're small? Like, why do we think we're smaller than we are, and that we're not as capable and things aren't as possible? And I think there's a bit of mental gymnastics that have to occur for you to figure out that you're actually a more powerful entity than you realize. You're a more powerful force of nature than you realize. And sometimes you shooting your shot is actually going to help everyone else. And I don't think we always think of it that way. I think sometimes we're just thinking about ourselves, and we're thinking about, other people can do it, but maybe not me. But maybe the team is waiting for you to kind of take your shot. And who's the team? Well, I don't know. It could be everybody around you. It could be your parents. It could be your siblings. It could be your friends. It could be your partner. It could be your children. But, shoot your shot. Why aren't you doing it? And that's kind of something that I'm thinking we're getting into. There's probably more, but I want to pass it to Evan. And before I dominate the topic of this discussion, what do you think it's about, my man?
Well, I think I'm going to be discovering a lot of what it's about. There are a number of directions that I think that we can go with. Something that you had brought up that I think is going to be an important one to dive into at some point in this is this idea of disappointment. One of the things that I also think about in this as well, especially in that whole vein of being good enough. And I think that there's a lot of people out there, and there's a lot of conversation that's in our culture and society about, trying to prop ourselves up, which is an interesting thing in and of itself, because it's a huge thing of like, you're good enough and you're worthy. And, we have affirmations that we do or whatever. Like I've never been a big affirmation person, even though anytime I've ever done them, I found them to actually be quite useful. But aside from that, getting back to the point, this is a big thing in our culture. And it's interesting that this is something that we kind of have to do to ourselves, because it shows its opposite, right? It shows that, oh, well, we're focused on this whole thing of trying to build up confidence in ourselves and in each other, because obviously there's a huge part of us that just doesn't feel like we're good enough, and not feeling good enough often means that we don't feel like we deserve good things to happen to us, which can lead to us not shooting our shot. Or I'm going to just say shooting our shots, because I don't think it's just like one. Yeah. There's multiple shots at multiple different things in our lives that will come up, right? And so yeah, that whole good enough thing is an interesting one, because I can definitely relate to it, and I think a lot of people can relate to some area in their lives where not feeling good enough comes up. But there's a part of me that just wonders at a certain point where that becomes an irrelevant thing, where that whole game and conversation that we're having with ourselves of like, oh, I'm not good enough, or like, I'm good enough, I deserve this, and blah, 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 where I just go, okay, like, that might be a stopgap thing in a way, like it's a transitionary kind of thing that we need to do with ourselves. But at some point I just go, yeah, but it's, when it comes down to, well, what do you want to do? Like, really, in its most simplistic place, it's go, well, what do you want to do? You want to do that? Okay, great. Feeling good enough or not doesn't have anything to do with you doing that to a certain degree, even though it feels very much like that. But I think that there's a lot of ego that's become involved. And I don't mean that as a way to insult people, like I don't feel good enough to do something. It's like, well, that's because you got an ego, right? But it does mean that there's some ego that's involved in that typically, because you're so afraid of what's going to happen to this identity of yours, what's going to happen to this person that is you, right? And this idea of this person that is you, that's so often caught up in that whole thing. Where I think that's where I'm coming from, in the place of, there's a place where that becomes an irrelevant conversation, because when the focus is no longer on yourself, but the focus is on, well, what is the thing? What is the thing that you want to do? What is the thing you're passionate about? What is the thing that you have fire about? Then good enough doesn't matter. Right? Like there's I don't know. Like there's just something around that. So I'll leave it there.
All right, man. I can relate to this actually, because when I started my soccer career, like I was pretty late to the game. I didn't start till I think I was 10, and a lot of kids had played. They played since they were like 3, right? Like I was way behind. I didn't even really know how to kick a ball, and but I was somewhat athletic, so it kind of gave me a little bit of a break, playing. But the first team that I played for, I just ended up on this kind of like really like high, like just this really good top level team in the division. And then we won the league and all that was all really great. And my mom, she knew nothing, but she saw an ad in the paper that said, tryouts for this team. And she knew I wanted to play soccer. She didn't know she put me in for the best fucking team in the entire province, like in my age group. She's like, yeah, let's just send them out to these tryouts, I made the team. I honestly don't know. Honestly don't know how that happened, because like, I honestly, when we were doing tryouts, we were playing a scrimmage match at one point. And I didn't know where to be. They were like, Brandon, you play on the wing over here. And I was like, okay. First of all, I didn't really even know how to play the wing. Second of all, I didn't know where to be. So I was watching the other winger on the other side of the field, and wherever he ran, I just kind of ran in line with him because I didn't know where to be. I didn't know what to do. And like somehow I made that team. And then it didn't take them very long after I'd made the team that they started to realize, like, we've cast this where we've got this kid on our team who's really kind of green and inexperienced, but I wanted to be great. I wanted to like it wasn't even that I cared about soccer in the sense that, but I was a part of this team and everybody wanted to be great and the team was great and I just wanted to live up to that. And there was a quality to it where it didn't matter that I wasn't good enough. I just looked at all these other great players that I was surrounded with. And by the way, I've shared this story a few times. We had the best scorer in the entire league on our team. So I had this like guy to look up to who was literally the best in the league, and he was on my team. So I had these incredible players around me who, and that year, another little fun note about that year, with the year that I made that team, the first year, because I actually played for them for a couple of years, but the first year that I made that team, we won the provincial cup. We got a gold medal and everything. And, we went all the way to the top, right? And what's interesting is that it never factored into me as am I good enough was never really a concern. It was more about, I just wanted to be good. And so the coaches would say, this is the drill, this is what you're doing, this is what you need to do. And I would just go and I would do it. And sure enough, long story short, I did get cut from that team I played for them for 2 years, but on the third year, which I had the best tryouts I ever had, I played the best in my entire life at that stage. And even the parents were like, wow, Brandon really came back from the summer. It's like, but they still cut me because I think at that point they had already kind of made their decision but I was the most improved player, but at the same time, they were a team that was attracting more talent, and I was on the cutting block, and it hurt. I got to tell you, but I went down a division, but I became captain of that team, and that gave me an opportunity to be a leader and whatever. So I went from this player that didn't even know where to be on the field 2 years previous to being the captain of my next team. Like the character arc, the growth, the evolution. So anyway, my point is just that you don't really know. And sometimes when you don't know that you don't have a chance. You don't know that you're not good enough. So you shoot your shot because you don't know any better. And I think sometimes we don't shoot our shot because we think we know better. And that's something that I'm definitely confronting in myself more these days in my life, where it's like, I don't know better. I think I do. I walk around like I do, but I don't. I'm constantly surprised by what I think is possible for me and then what is actually possible for me. It's just one of those things. I'm like, this will take about this long and this is probably what's realistic. And I do that shit to myself. And then all of a sudden I turn around and it's happening. And I'm like, what? Wow. So anyway, I don't know what you have to say about that, but that was a thought I had.
Well, I've got a few thoughts from your thoughts there.
Okay.
So yeah, the whole thing of what's possible, I thought that was in our preliminary chat, might have been sort of the title of this, like talking about what we think is possible. And I'm going to come in here with another one of these sort of weird things where I also think that's another game of, good enough, not good enough, possible, not possible. It's like, it's irrelevant, right? Don't say it's possible. Don't say it's not possible, right? Stay in that open channel and you'll find out, right? And that gives you the best opportunity to shoot your shot, right? And to be present and be effective in the place that you want to be effective, right? And instead of saying like, oh, I have no idea, right? Coming in with that open curiosity, which is interesting because that's so much of what I've learned about what great acting is about. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to go down here exactly, but I'm here, right? I'm here. I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to be as present as possible. And just coming back to your story about your soccer days and this team and finding yourself in a position of being very green on an experienced team and suddenly you're there on this team. And I think that brings in an interesting element to this conversation because you were the worst person on this team.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like you were the worst person on this team, but that didn't count you out.
Right.
That doesn't count you out of being able to be there and to contribute, and that there's something meaningful about your presence there that is maybe not entirely known. There's a whole lot of that's unknown as to why this situation has happened, how you found yourself to be here. But when you get into that position, to a certain degree, it sounds like that team and everyone was just like, okay, but give us what you've got, right? Give us whatever you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, right, there's something that happens there when you really put yourself into something with passion and dedication. Whatever comes out of that shot that you're taking, there is usually some kind of growth and evolution that happens as a result of it. That doesn't happen if you don't shoot that shot.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen if you're just half-assing it, right? But when you've really committed yourself in shooting your shot, it opens up this expansive capacity to it. And in the case of your story, yeah, it meant, no, I'm getting cut from this team, but it also means now you've been put into this leadership position in this other place where you had an opportunity, arguably, to make an even bigger impact for more people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that. And that's, sometimes we just don't know where these shots are going to take us. And I think that's another element of this topic that was something I was interested in exploring, is that you don't control the result of the shots that you take. You don't and right now, we're in playoff season right now, and it's for both hockey and basketball, and there's a lot that we can learn from using sports as analogies and about life. And I'll go hockey just because I know hockey much better, but you can take shots, you can have a look, you think it's like, oh, I've got a good look. You take that shot. Oh, someone just kind of came in, they blocked that shot, right? Or the goalie made the save, right? There's no guarantee of what happens from the shot, but you've got to take the shots because you also just don't know. There are shots that are taken by players where, it doesn't look pretty, but somehow that puck, it gets through, it bounces off of legs and bodies, and it finds its way into the net. And it's a surprise, mm-hmm. right? But it's still incredible, mm-hmm. right? So there's that's another element to this conversation that I think is really important, and in a way I think it's kind of encouragement and verifies some of my hypothesis about this good enough, bad enough, possible, not possible. It's like, look, just shoot the shot because you don't know what the hell's going to happen from it anyhow, mm-hmm. right? You don't know if, no matter what, right? You don't know matter what's going to happen of it. And if you hadn't shot your shot, even though you unknowingly found yourself in that situation with this soccer team, if you hadn't shot that shot, you didn't have that experience. You weren't on that team. You didn't learn all the things that you learned. You didn't get equipped with all of those things that you were able to go and bring and teach other people. Mm-hmm. Like imagine if that had never happened. Yeah. Imagine if that thing where you were completely with your completely over your head, right, on in this situation, right? Because that sounds to me like, I've heard the story a number of times. It sounds to me like you were totally in over your head, yeah, like with this situation, but yet you kind of scored on this one in a weird way.
Yeah, there's there's a lot to that story, and I mean, if that never happened, I don't even know who I would be today. Like, I honestly don't, because so much of that shaped me and shaped my life. And it's hard to even imagine an alternate reality when I stop to think about it. And I mean, I think the other thing too is, but the one thing that I have an interesting perspective on, in my opinion, I would say, is that I know what it's like to be on a championship team and ride the bench, which I don't think a lot of people talk about. And I mean, we always love to hear the star. We always love to hear the star's story of how they won the cup. And, like that's a very interesting and captivating story. That's the hero story, right? But I had a friend I remember, and he taught me a lot just about life and about soccer, but about life too. And he would often talk about the unsung hero, the person that no one sings their song, but they're like this integral part of the team. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily fully understood what he meant when he was talking about it, because we were just teenagers at the time, but there's things that he said. Sometimes someone says something and like years later you're like, oh yeah, that's so true, And I think that there's when people aren't singing our song, we think, oh, I must not be that important, but it's like, you might be absolutely crucial, but you're one of those team members or those players or those participants in this thing that people don't realize the work you're doing. They don't realize, because you're not the one in the limelight. You're not the one that the light's being shined upon. And I think that one of the mistakes we often make when we're actually trying to do something in the world is we think if the light isn't shined on us, at least I know that this happened for me a little bit, is when the light isn't shined on us, we think that we don't matter. And I want to argue that that's actually not true at all. And it's something that I've come to realize more and more, is that whether the light shines on me or not is actually quite irrelevant. And sometimes the light isn't shining on you and you don't think you're really doing anything. And then all of a sudden it gets turned on you and someone's like, thank you for doing this thing. And you're like, what? Someone was watching me? What? Like someone paid attention to what I did? So I think there's this kind of quality to shooting your shot where you don't have to perceive yourself as the star, or you don't have to perceive yourself as the hero or anything. I think some of my favorite stories are about ordinary people that do extraordinary things, as opposed to extraordinary people that do extraordinary things. Like, I've often found that superhero movies, I understand the appeal. I understand how there's this kind of idolization of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have these superpowers and be this person that's so important in the world and blah, 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 whatever. I get that. But like a movie that I really like, and I could name a bunch of others, but this is the first one that comes to mind, is like the movie like Die Hard. And the reason why I like Die Hard a lot is because the main character, he's an unsung hero. Like he's a guy that ends up in a situation and he has to deal with it. And I feel like so much of life is like that. It's like, you didn't ask for this. You weren't looking for it. And now you're here, and now there's an opportunity. And sometimes you don't even want to live up to the opportunity, but like, he's the only guy, and like, whatever, I'm not ruining the story, but he's the only guy in the building who isn't being like tracked, who isn't like held hostage, who could do something about this situation. And I feel like there's so many times in life that are like, it's just like a symbol of something where we have an opportunity to do something. We don't think of ourselves as that important. We don't think we matter. But if we just stepped up and did it, it would make all the difference in the world. And I think this conversation is very much about that. It's very much about, sometimes you're gonna be the one, the unexpected hero, the unsung hero, the person who all of a sudden the light gets turned on you when it's never been turned on you. And I think that you're gonna there's moments where you can realize you matter more than you thought. I'll share one other story just because this was a transformational moment in my life. So when I was younger, I used to have this perception of myself that nobody cared about me and nobody really remembered me. Like, I just thought of myself as invisible. That's just how I thought of myself, as like, whatever. And I remember one time there was a party, some type of social event in the industry, and for whatever reason, I opted not to go. I was going to go, but then I opted not to go. And then later, someone from the event or the party or whatever came to me and they go, "Man, you weren't there." They're like, "I missed you." And I was like, someone noticed I wasn't there? Like, yeah, we were talking about it. We're like, "Where's Brandon?" I was like, people were talking about me not being there? What is going on here? Like, it like blew my mind. I couldn't believe that people were at a party thinking about me, concerned about whether I was there or not. It shifted me forever. And I realized, wow, just me showing up actually matters. And like, it sounds so stupid almost to say out loud, but like I honestly didn't. That's how little I thought of myself. That's how little I thought of my presence. And I still see rumblings of that still today come out in my perception of myself, where I don't think I really matter and I don't think I really make a difference. And often there are other little. That's a more prominent story, but like there are other moments where I realize, oh, actually it does matter more than I realized. And I think that's something about shooting your shot is sometimes you just got to show up. I feel like, it's a long told wisdom, but it's like, you got to just show up. I mean, I think that's the first battle in everything we ever do. Like if you want something or you want to be a part of something or whatever, your first task above everything else is just show up. You might be like, I got nothing to offer. I'm useless. I feel tired. I'm depressed, whatever you think's going on for you. But if you could just get yourself to show up, something could happen. But if you don't show up, nothing will happen. And I think that's a really important element of this conversation, which is just shooting your shot is sometimes not this big glorious moment. It's just getting there, just show up.
A lot of what you're saying reminds me of this old interview I remember reading of John C. Reilly, the actor John C. Reilly, in a GQ magazine or something. I think they had done a piece. This was back in, I don't know, 2006 or something like that. And it was GQ's 10 greatest actors of our generation or something like that. And they put him as one of them in there, and they asked him about his career trajectory, because John C. Reilly is an odd looking guy, not what you would consider as your traditional leading male in a movie kind of a thing. And he was asked about this and how he had spent so many years of his career doing these smaller supporting types of roles. And he said something to the effect of, he's like, I always considered all of those roles as being the lead role in their universe, right? Hey, they're in the center of their lives in this story. And he said, I've always thought that the best thing to do is if everybody is committed to their little corner of the sky. It was something like, he said, put it in this way of like, it's like when you're committed and you're dedicated to your little corner of the sky, that was really the focus of it, where it's like, yeah, maybe you're not the spotlight, maybe you're not, that, but you have this spot and it's yours, right? Like that's yours. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to, but it's yours. So make the most of that corner that you've got, right? And by committing yourself to it and really dedicating yourself to it, sometimes people notice, because then John C. Reilly became a pretty big actor. He's kind of disappeared a little bit now, but he ended up becoming a lead in so many movies and was a really, he took leading roles for a period of time there, which typically didn't happen. But it happened because of that commitment that he had to what he was doing, right? And really making the most of those opportunities. Another thing that I just in some of what you were saying as well is that comes to mind with this topic is that sometimes there is an element of picking your moments to shoot your shot.
Yes.
It's just because otherwise it's like if you're just you think of any sort of sport, it's like you don't just take a shot from like any old place at any old time, right? It's when you get the right look, and I think that's, very often in sports, that's a thing that happens with players is like they have the look, but they don't take the shot. And everyone goes, why didn't you shoot? Like, why didn't you just shoot it at that moment? Like, but there's an element to which it's really about recognizing the time as well, right? And not trying to necessarily force it or like you've got to be doing this at every single moment. But it's in some ways it's about being ready and prepared to shoot the shot when the moment arises, right? And because life kind of does that, right? Like but you've got to, it only does that when you actually get yourself in there, right? Like you've got to actually get down into the arena. You've actually got to get in, you actually have to take that spot in the sky in order for that. I know. I'm just going back to like everything that we've gone through. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. You've actually got to get in there, right? In order for those opportunities to present themselves for you to shoot that shot. But if you're just, if you're up in the bleachers, which, hey, don't get me wrong, that can be fun. It can be fun on the outside looking in. But it's typically not the place you want to stay when it comes to the things you're passionate about, right? Like the things that we're really passionate about, it's like we don't want to be standing on the outside looking in. We want to be in there, right? And if you're on the outside, you're never going to get that look, right? The crowd that's cheering in the stadium, like they don't get to go down onto the ice and and play with the players. You're not going to get to do that. So if you want to do this thing, right? If you want to do that thing that you're passionate about, you've got to actually, you've got to get down there, right? And commit yourself to where you can commit yourself to. And that's when you're going to get your looks. That's when those opportunities will start to present themselves. But like I say, it's coming back to what you're saying of showing up, right? You've got to show up to that place and not know what's going to happen, right? But that you're there, right? And that's really all, athletes are doing to a certain extent. Like they've put themselves in a state of readiness. They condition themselves, artists too, right? You position yourself into a state of readiness to what you do. And then you show up and you see what happens, but you ultimately don't know what's going to happen.
There's one little wisdom and joke that I've always kind of held a little near and dear to the heart is, how many actors does it take to change a light bulb? 100. 1 to change the light bulb and 99 to say that they could do it better. And I think that's such a good joke because it's not just kind of like funny in a certain way. It's like, especially if you're in the industry, but it's like so much of life is about being the one that's doing the thing. And it really is irrelevant if someone could do it better. Like there's lots of things that people can do better. I think the thing is that if you're always thinking that the best person gets the job, that the best person it doesn't work like that. It's not the reality we live in. And granted, I do think you should be the best you can possibly be. And to be the best and to get the opportunity is a wonderful mixture of things. But it actually doesn't work out as much as we'd like to think. And a lot of the time, a person that has a great career and a person that fades into oblivion is the person that has a great career was the person that showed up. And the person who fades into oblivion might have been better, but they didn't show up. And that's the difference, because you work with what you got. And the world is always just working with what we got. And, if you go, listen, I have a screwdriver here and it's kind of worn out, like the grip is worn and, it's not, the end is kind of mauled a bit, but it works, but, it's kind of mauled. And it's right here and I can hand it to you now. Or you could go across town and go grab this other screwdriver and you can have it free. And it's perfect. It's pristine. The grip is nice. The head is perfect, everything. And you're like, well, let's see if this one works. This one that's right here. Let's see if it does the job. Because if it does the job, I don't need the perfect, pristine. So the thing is, I feel like a lot of artists and athletes and people like that, just people in various competitive mediums, they think, well, I'm better. Like, why not? It's, well, you're not there. It's often what's readily available. That's who gets the part. That's who gets the thing. So if you want to be somebody that gets rewarded in life, show up, be present, be omnipresent, be available, be there, be ready, be easy to work with. Now I'm not saying don't have integrity, don't have boundaries, don't have any of that stuff, because that's a whole other topic, and we could go down a rabbit hole of that. All of those things are very, very important and absolutely necessary. But as far as opportunity goes, what's front of mind, what's available now, what's right here, that's what matters. And so there was I'll share another soccer story. So this was season 2 of that team that I ultimately got cut from, but I made the team on the second year. And that was a little bit of a miracle, because the reason why I made it was because I grew so much over the first year that they decided, even though I was literally the worst player on the team for the first year, they decided to take another chance on me. And, my development was huge. I was just growing exponentially quickly. The first tournament we went to, this was before the regular season started, we went down to the States. We drive down, we do this big tournament against all these teams from the States and from different countries and whatever. And in the first 2 games, I scored 3 goals. And I was like the leading goal scorer in the tournament, like in the first 2 games. And they were good goals. But the thing is that part of the reason why I got these goals was because I was in the right place at the right time, and another player decided to pass to me. And it just so happened that I was in the right place and that I was available and that I was the guy they passed to, because to be honest, my team, I don't know like how much they trusted me. You know what I mean? Like, especially it's the beginning of season 2, because at that stage, I was still kind of the guy that you wasn't super reliable yet. I wasn't as skilled as everybody else. I probably made more mistakes than most, and it is what it is, right? But, one of the things too about playing team sports is that if your team trusts you, they will pass you the ball, the puck, the whatever. But if they don't trust you, they'll tend to look for a different pass. It's just a reality of sports. And sometimes, whether they trust you or not, you're just in the right place, and it's like, well, let's give them a shot. And sure enough, like, I was in the right spot. They gave me a shot, and I scored goals, and I was like doing really well. And it was a very exciting start, because I'm sure that the coaches were kind of on the fence whether should they have kept me, should they have not. Like, I'm sure I was right on the cutting block. I was sure I just barely made that team. I'm sure that I was like probably one of the last decisions they made. And I'm sure that when that tournament started, and it was like my first 2 games with the team in the new season, scoring 3 goals against elite teams on my first matches was like, whew, we made a good decision. But the thing is the reality is that what I had learned was not, I was better, but what I learned from these guys I was playing with was where to be. Remember, when I started this team, I didn't know where to be. I was following a guy on the other side of the field. I wasn't even really in the right place. I was just trying to be in the right place. But now I started to wrap my head around it. I started to go, oh, this makes sense. That's where you should be. And so I think a lot of this shoot your shot, and you brought this up, is like, yeah, I shot my shot and I scored. And I think my first 3 shots on net, so it was 100%, 3 shots, 100%. It was like, my statistics were like ridiculous, right? For the first 2 games. Cause like, I think I had 3 shots and I scored every single shot. So you can't ask for more out of a forward. Like you just can't. And you think about how much a forward touches the ball in soccer is like very limited anyway. So the fact that you get 3 goals, and I probably didn't even play the full game, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's very interesting, right? The point is that shooting your shot, I think, Evan, you brought up a really good point. You don't just take it from anywhere. You find yourself in the right place. And a lot of your responsibility about shooting your shot is, where do I need to be? I always think of that Gretzky quote, is that he would say, I go where the puck is going to be. And that's a lot of where we have control. We don't have a lot of control over where the puck ends up or where the ball ends up or whatever, but we can go to places where it's likely to be. We can go to places where things are likely to happen. And so I think that we're always battling with this kind of, this line between where are we in control and where are we out of control. And it's very hard for us to determine a lot of the time because things get complex in life. But I think part of our responsibility is, let me show up and be in a place where things are likely to happen. They might not happen. I might not get my opportunity. It is what it is. But let me put myself in the position of possibility. And when you're in the position of possibility, every once in a while, someone will pass you the ball. They'll pass you the puck. They'll pass you the whatever the thing is. And then you shine. And I walked away from those first 2 games probably being like, I just remember my dad and we went for a bite to eat after game 2, because I think it was like game 1, I only touched the ball once, I scored a goal. Game 2, I think I scored the next 2 goals, and I only touched the ball twice, like up front and, for a shot. And I remember us going for food afterwards and just talking about it and just being like, and he's like, wow, son, it was like one of those moments, because everybody in the tournament was all of a sudden talking about this kid, because nobody fucking knew who I was. You know what I mean? And the thing is like, it was an interesting moment. But the thing is like, I was still not the best player on the team. But that's what life is like. Sometimes you but if you show up in the right spot, you get your moment of glory, So anyway, I'll pass it on because. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't mean that your contribution isn't extremely meaningful. I looked this up before we started because I was curious. We were talking about, continuing on with the sports analogies, but I was curious as to how many players in NHL history ever win a Stanley Cup. And it was lower than I thought it was going to be. It was like 14.4% of players who've played in the NHL ever win a Stanley Cup. That is so low. The odds are against you if you're a player entering the NHL that you're going to win one. But does that mean you're not going to go and play in the NHL? And a thing I never looked up, it'd be easy enough to Google. I'm not going to do it right now, but it'd be interesting to look at who are some of the greatest players to have never won a Stanley Cup. There'd be some and it doesn't even have to be hockey. You pick whichever sport you want. Who are the greatest people to have never won the big thing, right? And you're going to come across some incredible names who had a huge impact on their sport, right? Does that mean that these people were like like this idea that 85% of the players in the NHL are inconsequential, unimportant, it's insane. Yeah. It's totally ridiculous. But I think that we so often we put that on ourselves as being like, unless this happens with what I do, it was not worth it. It was, and that's such a mistake. I think it's such, that's such a tunnel visioned approach to your life and what you're doing, because there are so many incredible things that can come out of you going for something, right? That you care about, right? And aside from, just your own growth and lessons that can come out of that, but there are still incredibly glorious moments that are going to happen from it. It's just, they don't necessarily look like the thing that you have in your head, because I think that sometimes the thing that you have in your head can be one of the most destructive things that will stop you, because you have it in your head that I need to win a Grammy, right? I'm all like what does it say if you're only getting into music because you want to win a Grammy? Hey, that's great if that happens for you, but what if it never happens? Like, I think that sometimes that's a good thing for artists to ask themselves in whatever field they're in. What's sort of the most prestigious thing that everyone wants to get the biggest, what's the word? The biggest acclaimed kind of like recognition. What is that thing? All right. What if that's never going to happen for you? Right? Just what if that never happens? How do you feel about what you're doing? Right? Does that change? Are you still going to do this thing? Are you still going to go for it? Like, because that's, if the answer is yes, that it's like, then, I mean, that's a fucking win to me. Yeah. Because that means that you're in this for the right reasons, right? And that thing might happen for you. You just, that's the thing. It's like, why you just take out the whole thing of it's possible, not possible, right? Just it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the thing that you're doing, right? It gets in the way of the thing that you want to do at a high level, right? You have to kind of just leave that as an open question mark, right? You're not saying it is, you're not saying it isn't. But either way, you're not putting that on you. Like, you're not putting that on you as weight that you have to carry as being like, no, I have to be able to win this award, or, oh no, this is never ever going to happen for me. Each of those things, that's an incredible amount of pressure. And also those things exert a certain kind of influence on what we do creatively that can make us act in ways that are disingenuine, that are inauthentic, all of that stuff, because we get clouded by the thing. We get clouded by the ego thing that wants to get involved. And that prevents you from being able to do the great work that actually gets people the recognition, right? Where we see something and go, holy shit, where did that come from? When you see that, hear that in art from people, and they go, holy shit, where did they go? How did they connect to this thing? How did they do that? Like, when people are just sort of baffled at the level of honesty and just beauty and whatever comes out of this thing, it's because you have a person who created that thing and they were just so not concerned with what was going to fucking happen because of it. They were 100% focused and involved, head, heart, everything. Their whole being was being poured into writing this song, into writing this book, into, performing that part, whatever it was. That's where they were completely. And we recognize it as a fact. But like, it's one of those tricky things. It's one of the biggest battles for artists and in art, because that influence, that ego influence is always trying to creep its way in. And you've always got to be on the watch for it and recognize it so that you can get to the work that's really important.
Man, there's been some interesting stuff that's come in this conversation. One thing that's becoming, I don't know, up to surface, I suppose, for me, is that something I realized as far as the ego thing goes, is that whenever I was chasing something, that was like trying to bolster my ego and my image and like try to get me something, like so I would look good or whatever, that it was actually getting me the opposite thing. And this is a weird kind of recognition to have. But like, for example, if you're trying to be good enough, what you're actually reinforcing in yourself is that you're not. So the opposite thing, you kind of always, when the ego goes for something, it actually always gets the opposite thing it's after. And that's why it's so destructive. And that's why we shouldn't use it to run our lives. Like, that's why you got to put your heart and things into stuff and not your ego, because your ego is always going to act like it's getting you the good thing, but it's actually getting you the bad thing. And it's always sneaking in the back door. It's always kind of like, yeah, it's fucking you in the ass, man. like, for those of you that jumped there, and for those of you that didn't, anyway, that's what it's doing. It's always getting you. Like, it's always getting you in a way that you don't expect, because by trying to prove you're good enough, you're just reinforcing the idea that you're not. And that's why you kind of have to go, like, by not trying to prove you're good enough, you actually prove you are. It's a weird thing how that works. It's like this kind of like a, the opposite can only exist. The opposite can only exist if the other exists. So there's another thing like like beauty, visual beauty only exists because you can recognize what beauty is. Like and that means that ugliness can exist. And that also means that someone can actually acknowledge or be aware of visual and see what beauty is. So like the thing is like, one of the things about not good enough is that we also have to remember that not good enough and these types of ideas were implanted into our mind somewhere along the line. They didn't exist as children. Children don't come out of the womb thinking they're good enough or not good enough. Watch them. They don't. Somewhere along the line, someone put that in their mind. It's not real. It's an idea. And it's a parasitical idea. It's a toxic idea. And the problem is that it can become very consuming. The other thing too is you can go, oh, well, this person gets the results and that person doesn't. And that's how we determine it. It's like, where did the comparison come into play? Like, who decided that comparison was a good strategy? It's not, by the way, but who decided that? The moment you start comparing yourself, you're already in trouble. I mean, I don't know how many times you have to say it, but it's the reality, right? It's just like you're going to live in hell. You start comparing yourself, you live in hell. Even to compare yourself to your old self, I think, it's problematic in and of itself. I mean, I think there is something like when you have to look at yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? I think this is like one of the things that I've been recognizing in myself. I've been going, why do I tell myself that something is farther away from me than it is? Why do I tell myself that I'm not good enough or I'm not lucky or like whatever thing I tell myself? These little things, they sneak in there and you're like, where the hell did that come from? And I have to ask myself, what am I getting out of that? I must be getting something. And I think it has to do with, I get to make excuses. I get to take the easy path. I get to do something. There's something I'm getting out of it because otherwise I wouldn't do it. And I think there's a lot of things we got rewarded for that are very toxic for us throughout our lives. And they it's not like anyone ever meant to do it to us, but they like someone goes, "Oh, I'm tired," and go, "Oh, that's really tough," And then you go, yeah, and you carry on this conversation of, yeah, it is tough. It's been really hard to do the day. It's like, yeah, but whatever. But it's like, I had this decision at one point in my life where I just said, you know what? I'm never going to talk about whether I'm tired or not. I don't want people to encourage that I'm tired. I don't want people to engage and be involved in that. But besides, I don't want to make more people tired. I don't want to be tired. Why am I even talking about this shit? Why am I even engaging with this shit and giving it attention? So I would say like another element of this conversation is you might say, well, why bother taking my shot? I'll never score anyway. Where did that fucking idea come from? How do you know that's true? How do you know? You don't. And the thing is that you got to look at it and be like, I have a chance. Every single time I show up, single time I take a shot, every single time I do anything, there's a chance. My chance might be minimal. It might be almost nothing, but I have a chance. and focus on the chance you have. And, this is a shout out to all the artists out there, especially actors, because people will say, well, the odds of what it is to be a career actor, like, fuck off. That's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about that you love this. You're thinking about that this is what you want to do with your life. There are plenty of people out there that took the safe choice that fucking hate their lives, and they do shit all day that is just an escape of that fucking hell that they live in, only to go on living in that hell for longer. So you know what? If you want to be an actor, and yeah, it's not practical and whatever, and there's all sorts of risks in going for what you want, don't worry about it. Like, there's a certain element of like, just go for what you want in life, because you know what? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to sit and look at your life and go like, if only I tried? Or, things aren't always going to work out. In fact, the chances are they aren't going to work out. But if you can learn to enjoy shooting your shot, if you can enjoy being the person that showed up, also, you don't know where that leads. The other thing too is like, I got into acting, and I wouldn't say that my acting career blossomed the way that I wanted to as a young man, but honestly, like, I'm so glad I did acting, because acting has taught me so much about storytelling. It's taught me so much about helping other people. It's taught me so much about life. It's taught me so much about being in the moment. It's been a Zen practice for me in so many ways. And the thing is like, if all we ever base our success upon is, did you make money? Are you successful? Did people recognize you? It's a shitty way to do your life. Are you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Does this give you passion? Do you get lit up? Why don't we ask ourselves questions like that? You know what I mean? And like, I get lit up about this because I think that, we live in a world a little bit where we have the wrong values. And I think that what we really want from the human team is we want to see people going for it. Whether you make it or whether you don't, we want to see each other. We want to see each other fucking swinging for the fences. We want to see each other going for it, striving, fighting, doing their thing, living their journey, feeling passionate, feeling happy, feeling excited, not getting fucking angry at each other in traffic, going home and trying to escape their reality. That's not what we want to see in each other. And whether you make it or not, I know that you're going to live an exciting and exhilarating and fulfilled life if you just allow yourself to live your life. So I think shooting your shot is sometimes just live the life that you think you want to live.
Man, I was just thinking about Rocky.
Yeah.
Like the original Rocky movie is so much about, a spoiler alert to anyone who hasn't seen Rocky. Fast forward for about 20 seconds. But Rocky loses the fight. Yeah. He loses the fight at the end, but we celebrate the story because he freaking gave it everything. And it still did all of these things in his life that were so incredible. This person, and I guess this almost kind of fits as well. I know we got to wrap this one up here pretty quick, but there's this word that came to mind, and I have a somewhat personal relationship to this word because I remember this experience of when I came back from doing some acting training, and I was like, I really want to teach the stuff that I just learned. Came back home from this thing, and I was like, in Meisner, if anyone's listened before, like, I talk about this shit all the time, but I want to come back, and there was a part of me that didn't know if I was good enough or qualified enough, or if people would accept me doing this thing, right? Would people accept me wanting to teach and being a teacher? And at some point, this word audacity came up, where I was just like, in my head, this wasn't even real people, which is a whole other can of worms there. But this thing came into my head of my peers thinking the audacity of this person to think that they can do this, right? And again, this was not any real thing, but there was like, I heard this sort of voice in my head, but then I heard another voice in my head that just went like, yeah, The fucking audacity, man. Be audacious. Like, yeah, have that, own that shit, right? So much of people finding success in what they're doing is because they had the audacity to do it. You know, and I don't mean that, you know, like I wasn't hurting anybody by what I was doing. Like, it's not about like just go out and, you know, be harmful, but like have some audacity. I think there's that's actually an important element for every person and artist to have in their being, is to have a little audacity going on in there. Have a little bit of that. How dare you? How dare I go and say, it's like, yeah, how dare I? I'm gonna say the shit, right? I'm gonna say the shit because this shit is important for me to say, and because I feel meaning and fire and passion about saying this. So I'm going to do it despite what people might think, despite what my experience might be, despite all of this stuff. I'm going to come out and I'm going to do it and I'm going to say it. Right? There's incredible there can be incredible power in finding that quality as well, right? In finding that audacity. So that was, I think, my last point. I think we should probably close this one off here. So Brandon, you brought the beer in for this conversation. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Okay, my man. Upon review, I think there's a possibility that you might have brought this on before, or we brought it on once before.
I didn't.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
This seems new to me.
Okay. Well, it seemed new to me when I got it, but anyway, it's enjoyable. I've been liking it a lot. This is called Cryptic Pale Ale. It's by Fieldhouse and Strange Fellows. So it's like a combo brewery thing. And it's a cool can. It's like it looks like a CIA file where they've like blacked out certain things. But what's funny is that if you actually look close, you can actually still read what's blacked out. So they like kept it in there. Yeah, but we went through a little period where we were just doing pale ales constantly, and I was like getting a little tired of it. But this one has been really good. I've been really happy with it. It's not too hoppy. It's not too punch in the face, which I find sometimes happens with these pale ales. It's been tasty. It's been good. And even though it's like a 5.7% alcohol type of thing, I felt it's gone down rather easy considering. So that's my thoughts, Evan. I don't know. What are yours?
It's delicious. Yeah. When I had the first sip of it, I went, oh, this is nice. This is really nice. It's very juicy. Mm-hmm. Like it's just kind of got a mouth-watering kind of quality to it, which has been very enjoyable, refreshing, and this is definitely a winner in my books. Like this is one of those ones that's like, oh, this is kind of made me take some notice of it in a very good way. So excellent pick for today, sir. You shoot your shots, right? You don't know what that beer's gonna be like. You shoot your shot. And sometimes it's crap, but sometimes it's great. Yeah. Sometimes it's mediocre. And I guess I'll just make closing comments. Yeah. I mean, that's shooting your shots, right? Like this was something that I thought might come up in the meat of the podcast, but it didn't, but it's coming up now, which is something we've mentioned on this show and talk about every now and then. But this thing about just taking things too seriously. And like what stops us from doing this, is like maybe just taking this thing a bit too seriously. Right? And to bring in our favorite philosopher, Alan Watts, it's like, look, learn to take life sincerely, not seriously. Right? You shoot your shots, you do it with passion and integrity and whatever you've got, you bring it to what you're doing. And then you just let it go. whatever happens of it, like if it works, it works great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's going to be another shot. Stay in the game, stay in the flow, stay in the play. Right? And maybe that's a better word for it, as opposed to the game. It's like, hey, look, we play games. Stay in the play of the thing. It's a play. Play, man. Like play. Like it's just like, it's not so damn serious. Right? Like it can feel that way. And like, because we've sold ourselves on this thing of like that this shit is so serious and things have to work in this, and and you have to be able to direct your life and to make things happen when you want it, how you want it, all of this shit. But that's actually, we don't want that. We actually don't want to have complete control over everything because it's super boring.
Yeah.
It's super uninteresting, right? We want to be surprised. We want to be wowed. We want to have our minds blown and be awestruck by things. And that only happens by not having control over shit. So let it go. It's not serious play. And that makes shooting the shots just so much, it makes you not only so much more effective at shooting your shots, but it just makes it so much easier. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I don't know how to wrap this up on my end, honestly. I feel like we covered a lot of what I cared to cover. And I think, just to kind of recap on that, I think showing up is sometimes shooting your shot is just showing up. And I think that, I think there's a certain element of we shouldn't put so much pressure on ourselves to be like, one thing I felt a lot of pressure about, because just to bring it back to the soccer thing, was I played forward for quite a while. And there's a lot of pressure to score when you're up front and you're in soccer, particularly. It's just like you're supposed to score. And you start to be like, well, I had a good game because I scored, or I didn't have a good game because I didn't score. And I walked away from some games and I was like, you know what, that was like the best game I played, but I didn't score. But like I started to kind of like decipher between the result and the play, And so just to kind of bring that in is like, I think if you show up to play, as opposed to show up to get a result, you're going to have a better experience of things in general. And you know what? If you do show up to play, good chance you will get the result. But I think if you make it based on the result, I think you're going to end up more often than not feeling a little bit frustrated or, whatever. And I think that's not the point. I think sometimes getting the result is good, but I think you have to kind of play the odds too, to some degree. It's like, look, if I keep showing up, good things will happen. And there's having a certain amount of faith and a trust in the quality of just showing up, and good things will happen. So, I think walking away from this, I think one of the wisest things a person can do is to recognize what they can control and what they're not able to control. And what you can control, at least in like a sports analogy, but I feel like sports often relate to life, is you can control showing up. You can control where you are positionally, and you can control your attention. But outside of a lot of that stuff, you don't really have a lot of control. And you have to kind of just be in response at that point. And so you use your ability to show up, your ability to pay attention, and your ability to get in the right spot as your ability to respond. And I'd say that's a truism for acting. I'd say that's a truism for directing and writing and probably even making music. I would imagine it is pretty much true for everything. Just, show up. And this could be simple things. This isn't always game time. Sometimes this is practice. Show up for practice and do your best. Put yourself in a position to succeed and give it a lot of attention to what you're doing. And then you're done practice and then move on. And you might be like, I don't know, that was a shitty practice session, but whatever, you did practice. You showed up, you gave it attention. You put yourself in the position to do it. You won. And I think we need to look at our wins like that. I think, I think a lot of the big things that we're after are based on the little things that we do. So I think you are more in control of the little things and less in control of the big things. But if you want the big things, do the little things. And I think that's kind of a truism. There's one other thing I wanted to say, it's blanking. So I don't think I'll just let it go. I'm going to let it go. But yeah, I mean, I would say, I'd say, the thing I'm walking away with today is just that I don't control the outcome of certain things, and there are certain things that I'm wanting of, and I'm working towards, and they feel out of reach. But what I am going to do moving forward after this podcast is what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on those three things I pointed out to everyone else to do, which is I'm going to show up, I'm going to give my full attention, and I'm going to put myself in the right position.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.